24th of Teves. Today is the Alter Rebbe's Yartzeit. The author of the Tanya, Rabbi Zalman of Liadi in Belarus. Today's his Yartzeit, so it's a special day. And today's class is also for Refuah Shlema for Shmuel ben Bracha Tirza. Should have a big Refuah Shlema. Okay, so chapter 15 in the Tanya. We're ending off, we're talking about the Beinani. The Beinani is the one who is able to, notwithstanding, he has an animal soul and a divine soul, sending signals to be expressed in the one body. He listens to the signals of the divine soul by the merit of mind being able to override heart, which is also the idea of a little bit of light that's in the mind, can override, can dispel the palpable temptation, darkness, so to speak, that the animal soul is proposing. But in chapter 15, we made a point. There is a reality. So if you stopped at chapter 14, you would think the Beinani is somebody who is always struggling and yet choosing the right thing, which is a tremendous achievement. It turns out there is a way that circumstantially or nature of certain people, they can have an animal soul and a divine soul, like we all do. However, because of either the way their life is set up, that they're studying the whole day, they're a career student in yeshiva or kollel, or nature, their disposition is not very sensual. They're just not into fulfilling pleasure. You have people like that. It's not because they're so hugely reverential to God that they're foregoing sensual pleasure. Some people they're not into that. They're more intellectual, let's say. And that person can also, with this kind of unique nature or nurture, can execute perfect behavior.
Wow.
Now, for most of us, I don't think that's the scenario. We don't have like that much of ease.
I tell you, Rabbi, I don't want to interrupt too much, but I'm very skeptical, but go on, okay? Very skeptical about somebody being like that. There's got to be something. Anyway, go on.
Okay. We gave an example. I won't take too much time, but for example, like when you're younger, you want a lot of candy and cake. And when you're old, and that's an animal soul desire. But when you're 50, you're middle-aged and older, you're like, I don't want candy and cake because I know it hurts me, even though it's delicious for 5 seconds. So you could say in that area of life, you're a Beinani. You just don't indulge in sweets. But the answer is you could actually, and you're always choosing what God would want you to eat, whether it's healthy, moderate portions. So you're a Beinani, let's say, and you're eating. At the same time, it's not a huge struggle. Now, not everybody has that. Some people do like candy and cake when they're middle-aged. And it is, and most of us, so you have to kind of overcome the urge to pick the right food that your divine soul would want. So that's just an area. Now, you can apply that to somebody who's like, it sounds foreign to us, but remember, this was written in 1797. It was written as a program for people who were all religious, essentially. I mean, those days, they're all shtetl, religious, right? Many of them were career lifelong Torah scholars. So he's writing a manual for everybody. And he's saying everybody's struggling, and you got to pick the divine soul of the God, the animal soul. But the reality is, he's talking to everybody. There is going to be people, particularly, I'd say, in those years when it was not uncommon to have people who studied 18 hours a day in the study hall their entire life. I mean, from their youngest, age till they died.
Wow.
And that person, you're telling me, like, essentially, I mean, obviously we could have challenges and more subtle things, but, they're spending their whole day doing Torah mitzvahs. And he's saying, you know what? That is a possibility for those few that have the scenario or the disposition that they're simply too occupied in Torah mitzvahs to even struggle, to focus on struggle. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think he's saying this is the rule. He's saying it's a possibility. Anyways, moving along. So, however, he says at the end of the day, most of us fall into the category of the Beinani, who's known as the Oved Elokim, the one who serves in a toiling way for God, which means toil means there's effort. It takes effort to serve God, to make the behavior choices that the divine soul is pushing over the animal soul. And that Beinani who struggles is called the Oved Elokim. So you have a Beinani, probably the exception, who's circumstantially in nature and nurture doesn't struggle as much, but most of us would be a Beinani that does struggle. And there's something beautiful about the struggle. He's actually, I think, in chapter 15, validating and saying the beauty of the struggle, that you're every day you're giving something to God. You're giving, a choice to God. They say the famous joke that when the communists took over and they were nationalizing farms, so they went to a farmer and they said, comrade, Gurevich, if you had 100 acres, would you give that to Mother Russia? He says, yes, I would give it to Mother Russia. If you had, a dairy farm with 100 cows, would you give it to Mother Russia? Yes, I would give it to Mother Russia. If you had wheat fields, would you give it to Mother Russia? I'd give it to Mother Russia. If you had a chicken and eggs, would you give it to Mother Russia? And he's silent. And understand, you're willing to give 100 acres if you had it, and 100 acres and wheat fields and dairy farms, but a chicken and some eggs, you won't. You're debating whether to give it to Mother Russia. Yeah, the chicken and eggs I actually have. So what do you got there is the idea of every day we are giving to God by choosing the right choice. And the effort is noticed. The effort is a gift. Okay. And he says, by the way, just I want to finish yesterday, is that a Beinani who is a lifelong student, who studies 18 hours a day, literally, could also serve God in a toiling way when he's constantly growing. For example, he, studies Gemara 18 hours a day with a certain amount of intention. He says, I'm going to study 18 hours in 5 minutes as a special beyond for God. Whatever, or I'm going to study harder subjects. I'm going to probe deeper, whether it's quantity or quality. The point is, he's not satisfying with just a situational accustomment of doing Torah mitzvahs. Okay, on that note, Tuesday. This explains what I just said, which was from yesterday. This explains the Talmudic statement that we quoted at the beginning, that he who serves God, the Talmud had a question on the verse. It said, when Mashiach comes, we'll see the difference of the tzaddik and the rasha, of the one who serves Elokim, God, and the one who doesn't serve God. And we said that's very repetitive. It's saying the same thing in two different ways. So they say, no. It turns out the Oved Elokim, the one who serves God, there's a tzaddik, there's a rasha, okay? And the one who serves God and the one who doesn't serve God is really a different categories of Beinani, as we explained till now. And now we'll understand it based on that. This explains the Talmudic statement that he who serves God, the Talmud actually gave an example of what's someone who serves God is someone who reviews his studies 100 times. I'm sorry, someone who doesn't serve God. I'm sorry, let's read it. He who serves God refers to one who reviews his studies 101 times, while him who serves him not, who doesn't serve God, quote unquote, relatively, refers to one who reviews his studies only 100 times.
Wow.
What does that mean? He goes on. This is so because in the Talmudic days, we're talking 200 BCE, around then, to the 200 common era. It was very common for the students of the Talmudic academies to review each lesson 100 times.
Wow.
They had no books, by the way, right? They all had to be memorization. You had to learn it till you memorized it. So a normal thing was 100 times, a standard.
Oh, you could write it down. You certainly could write it down.
Yeah, well, first of all, that also wasn't so easy to come by. It wasn't like parchment was so cheap. I'm saying it existed.
Paper and pencil.
It wasn't like as easy as for us today. Anyways, the Talmud illustrates this, and they say an example. So the Talmud explains that it's not repetitious. We're explaining levels of Beinoni, that there's someone who's doesn't serve God because they're doing the standard, but someone who goes beyond the standard is serving God. And they give the Talmud, next page 72. They illustrate this by analogy of the market of the donkey drivers. They give an example of like the donkey drivers, like the U-Haul company. Very pedestrian example back then. The drivers would charge one zuz, which was a coin back then, one whatever currency, for 10 parsi, 10 Persian miles. If you would want to transport, use the donkey to haul your stuff 10 miles, one zuz. But they would demand 2 zuz for driving 11 parsi. Even though it's not double the amount of time, but it's the 11th mile already exerted the donkey more than the norm, more than the customary practice. And therefore, that was the example they gave of how, like, you see, even in just, pedestrian donkey, wages, donkey driver wages, that a little beyond the standard, the breaking point, the breaking point, going beyond the breaking point, I guess, would be way more valuable than, just for that one. It's because you're going beyond. And this is what they said by the 101st revision, learning of the Torah of the Talmudic sage, which is beyond the normal practice to which the student has been accustomed since his childhood. Again, it was very common to study a lot, repeating, is equivalent to all the previous 100 revisions combined. 101, the 101st is compared to the 100. Why? In fact, its quality surpasses the first 100 times in its greater strength and power, so that it is only this one extra revision which entitles the student to be called he who serves God. Because, why is it? So we say, okay, it's very nice, and make a nice bestseller, by some self-help guru, the 101st time, But why is it? Why is it so much better? Meaning, you're saying it's better. Okay, it sounds good. It's good enough for a Hollywood script. The 101st time, it's a lot, that tipping point. But what's the mechanics? So he explains the mechanics of what does it take to get to the 101st time? What does it take for you to go beyond your norm, your current norm? In order to change one's habitual nature in mitzvahs, in Torah mitzvahs, he must arouse within himself the love of God by contemplating God's greatness in his mind. In order to master the nature that is in the left part of the heart, the seat of the animal soul, which is full of the blood of the animal soul originating in Klippa, where this nature comes from. This is a fascinating concept. We're saying even a religious lifestyle that you become accustomed to, which everybody agrees is very good, to have a sustainable, accustomed religious life.
Amen.
To me, it sounds like, and I have to learn, I didn't get to look at the Steinsaltz yet, but the fact that at a certain point you become comfortable with it is a low-key form of klipa. It's all good. This is the revolutionary point. It's all in the realm of good, and yet the certain complacency that happens at a certain time of doing what you do in religion, the complacency or the habituation is a form of klipa, which is a crazy. I mean, you think about this as very far-reaching ramifications. That someone could be super religious, but if they're not trying to grow, there's a klipa that is motivating all their good at a certain level, because it's your safety zone, it's your familiarity. And to and how do you grow? You can only grow if you think about a deeper relationship with God, a deeper awareness of God, a deeper realization that there's nothing else than God, whatever that means to the person on their level, that pushes you to say, well, how could I just do what I'm used to and be suffice about that? Like if the whole thing is God and my mission is to reveal God, am I revealing God enough? Is there a certain quantity or quality aspect where God is not revealed, and therefore I'm going to be finding a way to do more? And this meditation, this contemplation of God that leads into more God awareness and God reverence and love pushes the Beinoni to be the one who serves God, always trying to do more. An alternative type of service for Beinoni, he doesn't have the great intellectual sophistication to appreciate, how God is real, notwithstanding everything we see in front of us. There's another way you can motivate yourself constantly, is by arousing a revealed state of the love of God that is hidden in the heart. We're going to talk later in chapter 18, a superpower that every Jew has called the hidden love of God in the heart. But whatever it is, you can awaken it without tremendous intellectual sophistication, and that can motivate you to go beyond. You don't understand it, but it's very real. And that can help you control the nature that's in the left part of the heart. This too is called serving God, because you're waging war against your nature and inclination by arousing the love hidden in his heart. Now, if, however, the person who's, for example, a career Torah scholar of the 1800s, who's studying his whole life 18 hours a day, but it becomes natural diligence, he's a very smart, educated, assiduous personality, becomes what he does, and it's not a war. It's just doing what you have to do. This love that's making you, because ultimately, here's the deal, Alan, even the person who's a habitual 18-hour-a-day scholar of the 1800s, he definitely has got a respect and love for God, right? He wouldn't do it otherwise.
Okay.
But because that hidden love is not pushing him to find even greater access to God, it cannot be called, quote unquote, toiling service, avodah, in the sense of toiling service, because it becomes his norm. There's not putting down such a person. This is actually probably a very rare type of person.
In my mind, I've read, and I'm thinking that no matter how, when your Yetzer, as much as you have a Yetzer HaTov, your Yetzer Hara is up there
very
to match it
good.
Completely.
100%. It's a very, very good point. The Gemara says that the greater a person is, his Yetzer Hara is greater, is trickier. Let's say trickier. You mean if you're a greater do-gooder?
Not sure what it means, but that's what that's the word. Those are the words.
You're definitely correct there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just seeing a note here. I'm going to have to read more, maybe say tomorrow, but what I get from chapter 15 is how valuable the Alter Rebbe is talking. A person in those days, he's looking at himself. He's a struggling person. He's trying to do the right thing, and his Yetzer Hara / animal soul is tricking him up, making it really hard. And he looks at his neighbor, who was the rabbi's son, who was raised in a cocoon of holiness his whole life, and went on to become a career scholar and rabbi himself. And he's like, me, I'm the water carrier's son, whatever. I'm like, I'm struggling, right? And I must be a lower, a lower person. Comes to Alter and says, don't think that. It's not true. He said, don't think that, because it's all about what's going on inside. And in a way, the person who struggles more and overcomes has a certain, I don't call it trophy, a certain categorization of an advantage. The more you struggle, the greater you're considered a servant, a warrior.
There
a
always
warrior,
has to
servant
be
of
a
God.
struggle. I would say there always has to be a struggle. And if you're not in the middle of a struggle, then you're kidding yourself.
So I have a question, Alan. Do all people struggle similarly? Would you say that?
No, everybody's got a different.
So would you say some people struggle less? Would you agree?
I have no idea,
I'm
because
not saying
I'm not going to judge anybody else.
I'm not judging. It's not judging. It's theoretical. Do you think, from what you know about the human condition, from your experience in life, do you think like everybody has a different and equally hard struggle, or they have a different and not equally hard struggle? Even though there's so many ways of judging this, but I think it's fair to say, personality-wise, certain people struggle with the right thing on their level. Everything's not exactly comparable, but some people have a harder struggle than others.
It's the way it looks, but it's not the way it is. I think the struggle is going to always be there.
You know what? You can have that very favorable view, and that's fine. It's good. But I think what this is relevant to you and to me is sometimes we feel we're struggling more in a certain area than somebody else, because God gives different tests for every person's soul in different ways.
That's right.
And comes the chapter 15 and says, you know what? Don't be so down about how hard it is for you. Realize that is a special gift in that area of your life that you're giving to God more than somebody else in that area, because it's so hard.
I don't want to compete in that area. This is something that's personal for me, and I don't want to.
I'm not competing.
Evaluate anybody else.
It's about motivating yourself.
Sometimes I'm guaranteed a good struggle each week after Shabbos.
Okay. Bottom line is that appreciate how struggle is a tremendous value to God, and struggling to break your nature, to go beyond. Struggle is also like a negative, but sometimes it's not about staying away from the bad, but breaking the ceiling of good and going beyond is a tremendous value. And I think the Rebbe would say, in our generation, a person has to focus on the ever-increasing going beyond your limits. That even if it's small, even incremental.
I also think you have to yield to your Yetzer Hara wherever it's possible and it's legitimate. You have to enjoy life because it's there for you as well.
It's not Yetzer Hara. That's Yetzer Tov. It's enjoying life as part of your divine
Yetzer Tov has to be sympathetic to the Yetzer Hara.
We'll get to there. We'll get there. So yes, you're correct.